You know, looking back on it, the 5th generation of consoles was probably the most creative, and there were a lot of ideas that were introduced at that time that are mainstays now in gaming, especially with our current consoles. Take, for example, storing the game on a disc as a way of distribution. I mean, that's started then as the default storage medium, even going as far as getting you more immersed in the game with something like the Rumble Pak and bringing force feedback to the table. And in fact, that's what we're gonna be looking at today, the Rumble Pak from Nintendo, introduced in the mid-90s. We'll talk about some of the history here and also go over a very strange thing about the Rumble Pak that you may not have known about. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So first, let's take a look around the Rumble Pak itself. You can see on the front, it kind of just juts out here, and there is a rumble motor inside, so they had to make some room for that. Then on the back here, we can see it has a slot for AAA batteries, which it was already becoming frustrating at this time because we had Game Boys, very, very popular, and your parents would have to keep buying you batteries for them, AA's. So of course, this doesn't use AA's, it uses AAA batteries. So you gotta ask them for the other kind of batteries to go along with your Game Boy, or good luck if you have the Game Gear, because that was probably a trip to the store every other day. We can see at the top here, we have essentially looks like a cartridge, and if you look at the bottom of the Nintendo 64 controller, it just slots in here, and it fits in pretty nicely with sort of the cutout here on the controller, but it at least flows together pretty well. In fact, if you have this same colored controller, so it's all gray, it does look almost like one piece completely. And the idea here is, because the controller was modular with its attachments, you could drop this in and get that rumble experience, or if you needed to, use a memory card, which unfortunately you weren't able to use both at the same time. I believe we had third parties show up to the scene with memory card Rumble Paks, so that at least solved it, but when Nintendo launched this, they were definitely not thinking of using both the memory card and the Rumble Pak in the same controller. You would need player 2 to use the memory card for that. And I gotta tell you, when Nintendo showed up with this Rumble Pak, they paired it with Star Fox 64. And it was a really big deal. You look back on it now and you're like, what's the big deal? It was just rumbling, who cares? At the time, that was brand new, never heard of something like that. It was this weird idea that of course Nintendo's showing up with, but then months later, Sony showed up with their DualShock controller and put a rumble motor in each handle of the PS1 controller, and I think it actually made it more comfortable overall, added a bit of weight to the bottom part that would sit in your palms, and also make it a bit larger. However, Nintendo had patents going back to 1995 where they were working around the idea of having some sort of force feedback attachment for their controllers, and it seems that the date of that patent that these are based on was different from immersion. And remember, immersion took Microsoft and Sony to court, and it really affected Sony with generations down the line of systems to where they couldn't even launch with Rumble for their PlayStation 3 system. But Nintendo didn't have that problem at all, and a lot of that's just because of the technology and the patents they already had. But we might as well get the full experience here, so let's drop some AAA batteries in and we'll fire up Star Fox. So here we are in Star Fox, and it's not as strong as I remember it. It's kind of subtle here with some of the shots that I'm doing. I think if I have a bomb, that has a bit more of a rumble to it. For some reason, I remember just this game going crazy with the rumble motor. I think there are certain bosses that if you beat them and they explode, and it takes a while to explode, the rumble motor would go wild. And I feel like that's what I'm remembering. It could also be, okay, now there it goes. It could also be the batteries that I have here that might not be the freshest maybe, and that could also be causing it. But it is indeed rumbling as expected. A couple AAA batteries gets us there. But what if you didn't need batteries for the Rumble Pak to work? What if Nintendo had to put batteries in there for a particular scenario? And that is what we're gonna be trying to do today. We will attempt to make the Rumble Pak function without the need for AAA batteries, which would have been very useful back in the 90s. I wish I could go back in time and tell myself that, although then I'd also be giving like a 10-year-old me access to a soldering iron, so there's give and take there. Anyway, let's get started. We gotta pull the Rumble Pak apart. This is something I've seen floating around the internet for a little while now, and I've always wanted to just try it to see if it really is something you can do, and for the most part, get the same kind of experience, because at that point, it would have to pull the power from the Nintendo 64, which isn't a new concept, considering the PS1, or the DualShock, that did pull power from the PlayStation system completely, even from the really small PS1 system. I remember I got that system with the DualShock, and it was a very weird idea that, oh, I don't need batteries and it'll still rumble and all of this. So we'll go ahead and pull this apart, which, yeah, you can see the very large rumble motor right here in the front. And we've gone over this before, but the way this works, you can see it's sort of offset here. As that spins, it creates some movement as it is kind of moving back and forth, with this being weighted on one side and spinning. And then on this side, we have our main circuit board. This obviously plugs in to the controller, and then on this side, we have a rumble motor that plugs into the bottom. So here's the best part about this modification. It doesn't require any extra parts, and it's pretty easy. There is soldering that's involved, because what we have to do is move this resistor from here over to here. And from what I can tell, all that really does is bypass the power coming from the batteries and instead routes it to the system. All right, we have one leg up. The way I'm doing this, I'm just heating the solder that's there and just sort of lifting the legs up. You can also clean the solder out completely beforehand using a solder braid or a suction tool. This is just what I have on hand now, and it's pretty easy. It's coming loose without any issues. And there we go, the resistor is out. I just need to relocate it closer to where the rumble motor is, and that should do it. All we've really done here is move the resistor from these 2 points to these 2 points, and that's kind of it. As I mentioned, we're basically having the Rumble Pak ask for power from the system now, rather than the 2 AAA batteries you would have installed. So now all we have to do is put this back together, plug it in, and test it out. I'm kind of curious as to how the Rumble feels here, if it will still be as strong as with the AAA batteries, if it is it weaker? Let's see. No, it feels about the same. Okay, so it feels pretty much the same. And the thing with this is, and there's gonna be questions around the idea of, oh, why didn't Nintendo just go this route? Because it still feels basically the same. Let me fire a bomb. Yeah, so kind of here, but it feels the same. There's no real issues with this pulling power from the system. So the thing that's been brought up here, because people have kind of speculated on and off as to why Nintendo needed AAA batteries. And one of the things is because this system out of the box supports 4 players. If you have 4 controllers hooked up with Rumble Paks that would not require batteries, and it would be pulling power from the system, it'd be too much of an ask from the system when it comes to the power end, and you would have some weird things happening. I don't think the system would react to a point where it'll short circuit or something, but I've seen people online mention that the system will shut off, it will not provide the correct rumble intensity at all, or sometimes just no rumble. And in that sense, because there's possibility of 4 players plugging their controllers in with Rumble Pak at any time, Nintendo just went the route of make them use AAA batteries and we'll be safe. Also, if you've never played Star Fox 64 ever, great game. I recommend checking it out. It's on the Nintendo Switch online. See, with the bosses, you have the rumble going. So in that case, when you get kind of the flyover from the boss here, they hit you with some rumble just to, I guess, make it feel like it's a big thing that's happening with this massive ship flying over you. Again, small things now where you're like, well, yeah, of course you would do that, but that was next level back then. There it is. You can see it moving the whole controller across the table with the explosion of this boss here. Again, no batteries in there, just had to remove a resistor around. I also saw someone bring up the idea that the Rumble Pak may have had this wiring in place for, say, kiosks, where you just have 2 controllers hooked up, maybe even just 1, just to show off the Rumble Pak itself, because then you wouldn't have to change out batteries all the time. So I feel like if you have a Rumble Pak and you don't want to use AAA batteries, and it's mostly just you playing it, this is a good modification to do so you don't have to keep going through AAA batteries. But let me know what you guys think about this down below. The Rumble Pak itself, let me know if you got it back then and it blew your mind like it did mine when I got it with the Star Fox, the big box set, and they packaged that with it. It's just a mind-blowing experience. And then also, what about this modification itself? Especially if you've done this before, how's it been holding up? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.